Don't you just love having access to the information superhighway? Now, I'm no stranger to being told to shut up by those who live morbidly online. Sometimes it's as simple as I don't look like a real gamer, but lately it's not about how I look, what games I like, or even the fact that I dared to have an opinion. No. The new reason I should apparently stay silent is far more ridiculous. I live in Europe. Wrong continent. Argument over. Yeah. So, according to a very vocal subspecies of American gamer, anything I say is automatically invalid because I come from a place they've decided is an Orwellian nightmare where we're all arrested for saying the wrong thing about Dragon Age the Vanguard. You'd think I was recording these videos from a prison cell in Brussels, the way they carry on. Imagine being so pathologically online that hearing a British accent makes you spiral into a full-blown culture war meltdown because apparently the same people who screech about free speech the loudest don't actually believe in it, at least not when I'm talking. So, for some reason, Europeans merely existing and sharing their thoughts online is now part of the ever-growing trigger list. So that raises the question. If the UK and much of Europe have held the same basic laws and values for decades, if not centuries, then what's actually changed? What sudden shift in the last 6 months has made so many American gamers so weirdly comfortable with abusing us, trying to silence us and ridicule our opinions just for coming from the old world? I am Lady Decade, and if you like spicy gaming content, then hit that subscribe button. So, let's talk about why some Americans hate Europe so much. In my less than humble opinion, I strongly believe that the Game of the Year award this year will go to one from Europe. My personal favourite at the moment is the absolutely amazing Expedition 33, a turn-based RPG. And the best thing to come out of France since the baguette. What's even better is that I can get you 43% off this game, as well as up to 90% on thousands of other modern, AAA, classic, retro and indie titles, all by using my affiliate links in the pinned comment. Happy shopping. Before we get into it, a little perspective. I love both Europe and the USA. I've visited America many times, 25 states and counting. I've even been to America's Hat, otherwise known as Canada. On the other side of the pond, I've travelled through 19 different European countries, and I've got a massive Euro trip planned for this summer to rack up even more. I think I've seen more of the US than probably most Americans, and that's not me bragging, it's just context. These aren't abstract concepts or internet memes to me. These are real, tangible places I've actually been to, and hey, both Europe and North America easily rank in my top 7 continents on Earth. I say this now because, without fail, someone will accuse me of hating America the moment I offer even the mildest critique. But let's be real. When it comes to gaming, the US shapes the industry more than any other country on Earth. So, yes, we're going to talk about it. That's not an attack. It's context. What I want people to take from this video is a clearer view of the world, a bit more nuance, and maybe, just maybe, some understanding of why people outside your bubble feel the way they do. Now, full disclaimer, I know some of you are sensitive little sausages with lightning fast trigger fingers itching to rage type comments based solely on the title and the first 30 seconds. But this video is long for a reason. I cover a lot. There's a very good chance that whatever spicy thought you're brewing in your head has already been addressed, probably in detail and possibly with receipts. Last time, I had people screeching, "What about Ubisoft?" despite me dedicating an entire section to roasting them. So yes, I had to go into the comments and make some folks look incredibly stupid. And I don't want to do that again, but I will. Don't make me. You have been warned. If you've spent any time in the comment sections of gaming YouTube, Twitter/X threads, or Reddit lately, you might have noticed something weird. A growing number of American gamers online seem to really hate Europe, or at least the version of Europe that exists in their heads. So, what's actually going on here? American gamers, particularly those immersed in the culture war ecosystem, are burned out. After years of online conflict over topics like gender identity, diversity quotas, and the morality of monetization, many of them are no longer arguing in good faith. They're emotionally exhausted, ideologically cornered, and increasingly prone to lashing out. But instead of reflecting inward or confronting the corporations and systems shaping modern gaming, they found a far easier target: Europe. Rather than wrestle with complex issues or genuinely question why every major title now comes with a battle pass and corporate-backed diversity training modules, it's simpler to find a foreign scapegoat. That's where Europe comes in. With just a few keystrokes, any online frustration can be transformed into righteous fury. Europe is woke! It becomes a catch-all phrase for anything they dislike, often without even a basic understanding of the countries they're referencing. I've noticed that my home, the UK for example, gets reduced to a cartoon of censorship and cowardice. Despite years of conservative governance, a Brexit vote fueled by nationalism, and recent legislation recognising sex-based legal distinctions is still framed by many Americans as some leftist dystopia. France, on the other hand, is written off as a socialist playground, despite also introducing strict secularism laws and facing serious internal culture clashes. And then there's Scandinavia, particularly Sweden and Norway, which are portrayed as authoritarian, rainbow-flagged utopias where freedom of speech has been replaced with a state-mandated pride parade. These aren't real places to some American gamers. They're archetypes. What's happening here isn't new. It's the same tired American culture war. The issues haven't changed. Just a backdrop. Blaming the UK or France for everything wrong in the world today is as shallow and intellectually lazy as blaming all wokeness on one studio, one character, or one press release. But it persists because it's convenient, it feels good, and online, it performs well. In truth, this scapegoating is less about geography and more about displacement. American gamers are using Europe as a rhetorical decoy to avoid facing the uncomfortable fact that many of the things they despise — corporate pandering, algorithm-driven storytelling, shallow tokenism, censorship of speech, and even exploitative monetization — are being driven primarily by American companies serving American markets. It's not France pushing ESG funding, it's America. But acknowledging that would mean criticising their own side of the pond. And that requires self-awareness and nuance. Something many of these particular idiots do not have. The internet has made it easier than ever for gamers around the world to interact, share ideas, and play together. But with that global visibility has come a darker side. Visibility without understanding. Game devs and players across Europe are more connected to the international gaming conversation than ever before, but instead of being met with curiosity or appreciation, they're often met with knee-jerk suspicion or outright hostility, particularly from loud segments of the American online gaming scene. This hostility is rarely based on the games themselves. Instead, it's rooted on how these games are perceived through a narrow cultural lens. Take the term Eurojunk. Once a half-playful reference to clunky but charming Eastern European titles like Gothic or Stalker. It's now thrown around like an insult. Any game that dares to be mechanically experimental, narratively dense, or not AAA polished gets a label slapped on it, regardless of its actual country of origin or merit. In other words, it's shorthand for not American enough. Then there are the corporate policies. When Polish studio CD Projekt Red introduced menstrual leave for female employees, a move rooted in supporting their workforce's well-being, it wasn't met with mature discussion. Instead, American gamers declared the studio infected by the West, as if the mere existence of workplace compassion was a cultural virus. The irony being, of course, that this is a country whose government has spent the last decades fighting against liberalisation and whose gaming culture is often more traditionalist than many in the West. But then there is Ubisoft, because if there is one European publisher that deserves criticism, it's them. But here's the thing. Ubisoft isn't some bastion of European design philosophy or cultural expression. No. Ubisoft is the most American European publisher in the industry, and I mean that in the worst possible way. This is a company that churns out open world templates like they're being printed on an assembly line. Every game comes with a bloated checklist, a dull upgrade tree, and a tone-policed script, designed to offend absolutely no one and impress no one either. Their idea of innovation is reskinning Far Cry for the 10th time and slapping a new region on the map. And why? Because they've fully internalised the American corporate playbook. Chase trends, minimise risk, optimise for monetisation, and pretend it's all part of a grand artistic vision. They talk like Silicon Valley startups. They restructure like California tech firms. They even crash and burn with the same PR disasters. Remember Ghost Recon Breakpoint or Hyperscape, or the NFT push that flopped before it even left the PowerPoint stage? Ubisoft isn't a reflection of French creativity. It's a European shell housing an American-style live service obsession. So when American gamers lash out and accuse Ubisoft of being woke or ruined by Europe, it's laughable. Ubisoft isn't European in any meaningful cultural sense. They're not pushing avant-garde narratives or championing bold design philosophies. They're just trying to be EA in a beret and failing just as miserably. Ultimately, blaming Ubisoft's issues on it being European reveals how shallow the discourse has become. From many, there's no real effort to understand different developmental cultures, economic constraints, or social contexts. Just instant reaction driven by algorithmic outrage and culture war fatigue. But of course, opinions are developed online through more than horrible European companies trying to make games for America. One of the biggest forces driving the anti-European sentiment among American gamers online is the rise of AntiWoke influencers, a cottage industry of content creators who've built entire platforms around the idea that they're the last sane voice in gaming. Their message is simple and always the same. The games are being ruined, the devs are brainwashed, and they alone can see through the lies. But to keep that narrative going, they need enemies. Constant ones. And nothing plays better to their audiences than blaming foreign influence, specifically Europe. Which is why our entire continent seems to be thrown in with all of the people they don't like at home. So, through their two-dimensional worldview, Europe equals socialism, government interference, censorship, and climate pledges. It's painted as a continent where devs are too scared to make games with blood, boobs, or basic masculinity. The UK? That gets portrayed as cucked, a nation of submissive weak men in cardigans kneeling before the alphabet people, immigrants, or whichever group the algorithm has chosen to demonise that week. It's not based on reality, it's based on rhetoric that sells. It's all about framing, and these influencers frame everything through a very specific, very American culture war lens. And what they're selling, more than anything else I have noticed, is the extremely reductive version of freedom. Not actual freedom to create diverse types of games or tell different stories, but the kind of faux liberty that worships at the altar of consumer rage. That's why a game like The Witcher 3, made in a conservative Poland, somehow still gets framed as part of the progressive agenda, because once you've chosen your enemy, facts are irrelevant. So while this whole movement pretends to be about saving gaming, what it's actually doing is shrinking it, dumbing it down, painting the entire global gaming industry in red, white and blue and stars and stripes. And if you're outside that frame, you're the enemy. Didn't anyone teach these people that only the Sith deal in absolutes? Of course, it wouldn't be fair to talk about this without acknowledging that European gamers aren't exactly innocent bystanders in this cultural mess. Especially on platforms like Twitter, Europeans are often more than happy to sneer at American culture, and let's be honest, there's a certain smugness to it. You'll see tweets dunking on America's obsession with guns, mocking the fact that insulin can bankrupt you, pointing out the absurdity of school lockdown drills, or rolling their eyes at yet another having a positive or negative Trump-related meltdown. And to be fair, these aren't made-up issues. They're real, tangible problems that many Americans genuinely suffer from. But the way they're brought up online isn't always compassionate or constructive. It's often just a dunk contest, a pile-on, a ritual of digital superiority. And that's where things spiral. These online jabs, even when grounded in truth, hit a nerve. American gamers already feeling like their culture is under siege don't take it well. Instead of engaging in conversation, they lash out. They redirect their frustration not just at the European who made the joke, but at all of Europe. Suddenly, the UK is a failed state, France is a meme, and Scandinavian devs are ruining gaming with socialist gender propaganda. It creates a feedback loop. Europeans mock the real failings of the US, often with a tone of detached superiority. Americans feel attacked, not just as citizens, but as gamers, as consumers, as cultural participants. They retaliate by accusing Europe of being weak, decadent, or irrelevant. And so the loop continues. Europeans mock Americans, get defensive, Americans lash out at Europe's decay, Europeans mock harder. But here's a kicker. While both sides are flinging mud, neither side is talking about games. The actual content, the artistry, the developers, the design, it's all drowned out by nationalist chest-thumping and culture war theatrics. The comment section under a dev diary becomes an argument about the European Union. A tweet about a patch update turns into a debate about the Second Amendment. And in the end, everyone loses. Except for the influencers who are profiting off of the outrage. Like me, in this video's instance, we always win. Also, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Most of the Americans shouting the loudest about Europe being ruined have never actually been there. They're not reacting to first-hand experience, nuanced understanding, or even basic policy knowledge. They're reacting to content, tweets, TikToks, YouTube thumbnails, and Reddit rage bait designed to provoke a gut reaction in 3 seconds or less. Their idea of Europe comes from clickbait headlines about people being arrested for mean tweets, without any understanding of context, legal nuance, or whether the story even unfolded the way it was reported. It's TikToks that zoom in on someone in Brighton using neo-pronouns and frame it as a government-mandated identity crisis. It's Reddit threads warning that the UK has banned kitchen knives, as if there's a Bobby on every corner confiscating steak sets from pensioners. And when you feed that kind of content into the already overcooked stew of American cultural outrage, the result is inevitable. A completely cartoonish version of Europe. A Europe where every country is either collapsing under migrant crime, forcing drag queens into schools, or bankrupting itself with wind farms and period leave. It's caricature versus caricature and nothing more. Among American gamers, particularly those deeply embedded in the culture war echo chamber, Europe has stopped being understood as a real place. It no longer represents a continent full of different languages, histories and ideologies. Instead, it's been flattened into a punchline, a catch-all insult, a punch bag for everything they think is going wrong with modern gaming and society in general. Even in online multiplayer lobbies, this caricature bleeds through. Just having a British or Scandinavian accent can get you mocked. Not for what you say, but for the mere fact that you're from there. It's as if being from Europe automatically makes you soft, spineless and politically programmed. You're treated like some kind of government-assigned diversity officer sent into Call of Duty to hand out citations for toxic masculinity. The idea that you might just be a normal person trying to enjoy a game is apparently impossible. This Europe equals soft meme has become a shorthand for everything they want to reject. Empathy, nuance, inclusivity, regulation, collectivism, and anything that suggests the world doesn't revolve around individual freedom defined solely by American standards. Which brings me nicely onto another point. What even is freedom defined solely by American standards? Freedom, by American standards, is often defined as the individual's right to speak, worship, associate, and live without interference from the government. It's rooted in the ideals of personal liberty, property rights, and the belief that the state should exist to protect, not restrict, these freedoms. This interpretation tends to emphasise autonomy and minimal regulation, with a near sacred reverence for the First and Second Amendments of the US Constitution. But let's be clear, that's just the American definition of freedom. This worldview is far from universal. In many countries, freedom is seen not just as protection from government, but as a collective responsibility, balancing individual rights with social cohesion, public health, or historical context. What Americans might view as censorship, others may see as necessary boundaries for a functioning society. And when these clashing definitions of freedom hit the internet, especially in gaming or politics, that's when arguments tend to spiral, because everyone's speaking English but not the same language. For example, I get an incredible amount of grief online simply because the UK has hate speech laws, something that to many Americans is apparently unthinkable. But here's the thing. These laws aren't some terrifying new overreach. They've existed in various forms for decades, and most people in the UK are perfectly happy with them. They're designed to prevent speech that incites violence or hatred against others based on race, religion, sexuality, or similar protected characteristics, not to stop people from having opinions or making edgy jokes at the pub. And it feels like many people seem to miss this nuance entirely. But online, especially in American spaces, I constantly get told I don't believe in free speech, or that the UK is some dystopia because we draw the legal line in a different place. The reality is every country handles speech differently. The United States has its own unique First Amendment framework, but it's not the global standard, it's just their standard. Yet somehow they still seem to want to push their values onto the rest of us, as though any alternative way of doing things is automatically wrong or oppressive. Of course, hate speech laws aren't perfect. No law ever is. There's always room for improvement, clarification, and tuning, especially as society and technology evolve. But that's the nature of living in a democracy. If people believe these laws go too far or not far enough, we have the ability to vote in politicians who can bring those concerns to Parliament and push for change through the proper legislative process.
It's time someone had the courage to stand up and say, I'm against those things that everybody hates.
The system is designed to be flexible and it reflects the will of the people. So if the public's views shift, so can the laws. That's how representative democracy works. Strangely, many Americans seem to forget that other countries also have democratic systems, as if the only place with freedom and votes is across the Atlantic. We'll get back to how this links back to everything again in a moment, but for everyone in the US outraged by laws like this, have you ever taken a second to reflect, to think how authoritarian some of your own laws look to us, European gamers? Listen to how nanny state the US quickly sounds if I go and cherry pick some very specific laws the same way they do with Europeans. Here's the first, get this. You can get fined or arrested simply for crossing the street. Only in America could the simple act of crossing the road become a criminal offence. In most civilised parts of the world, adults are trusted to use their own judgment. If there are no cars coming and it's safe to cross, you cross. But in the land of the free, standing outside the lines can get you slapped with a fine, or worse, arrested. It's a perfect example of the weird authoritarian streak lurking beneath all the freedom rhetoric. Apparently, personal responsibility ends the moment your foot touches asphalt in the wrong place. For people who screech a lot about hating taxes, get this. If you are a US citizen, you have to pay taxes to the US, even when you do not work or live there. Imagine moving abroad for a new life, earning your money in a completely different country, and still having Uncle Sam's hand rummaging through your wallet. That's the reality for Americans who are legally required to file taxes every single year, even if they haven't set foot in the US in decades. It's called citizenship-based taxation, and only 2 countries in the entire world think it's reasonable to tax citizens who don't even live there: the United States and Eritrea. Yeah, Eritrea, a country so authoritarian it makes North Korea look like a yoga retreat. The US proudly calls itself the land of the free. Just don't try to leave, because they'll send you the bill no matter where you go. Right, here's another one. America is a place where an 18-year-old can legally get married, sign up to die in a foreign desert, be handed an assault rifle by the government, gamble away their savings in Vegas, be sentenced to life in prison, and be saddled with a 6-figure student loan they'll never escape. But order a pint of lager? Absolutely not. The US clings to a drinking age of 21 like it's guarding the Ark of the Covenant. Alcohol is treated like some kind of mythical elixir that will instantly destroy your soul if consumed before your 3rd decade. Meanwhile, in most of Europe, teens are sipping wine with Sunday lunch and learning moderation before they're even old enough to drive. But in the land of the free, nope. You can own a gun before you can legally order a Guinness, because nothing says responsible adulthood like being trusted with firearms and warfare, but not a glass of cider. Honestly, what the actual fuck? But wait, there's more. In America, even standing still can get you in trouble, literally. Loitering laws make it a punishable offence to hang around in public without a clear purpose, whatever that means. Of course, it's not enforced against everyone. A middle-aged man waiting outside Starbucks, yeah, probably fine. Teenager in a hoodie minding his own business, suddenly it's a public safety emergency. These laws are so vague that they may as well say, we'll arrest you if we don't like your vibe. For people outside the US, the idea that simply existing in a public space can be a suspicious behaviour sounds like satire, but no, this is real life in the land of liberty. However, standing around isn't the only crime that needs to be punished, as there are also laws in place against feeding homeless people. Yes, really, this isn't satire. Only in America could giving someone a sandwich be seen as a criminal act. In multiple US cities, it's actually illegal to feed the homeless in public spaces. Not poison them, not exploit them, feed them. You can be fined or even arrested for handing out food without a permit, as if kindness needs paperwork. Authorities dress it up with phrases like public sanitation or discouraging dependency, but let's be honest here, it's a PR move. Out of sight, out of mind. If people stop feeding the homeless, maybe they'll just, disappear, right? To most people outside the US, this isn't governance, it's dystopian theatre. It's the kind of thing that you'd expect in a bleak sci-fi film, not a nation that proudly bangs on about freedom and Christian values. America says, give us you're tired, you're poor, then slaps a fine on anyone who offers them a hot meal. This is freedom, baby, yeah! Then they have something known as civil asset forfeiture. Get this. Imagine being pulled over, having cash in your car, and the police just take it. Not because you're guilty of anything, but because they suspect it might be linked to a crime. That's civil asset forfeiture. A charming little loophole that lets American law enforcement seize your money, your car, or even your house without ever charging you with a crime. And the best part, the burden's on you to prove that you're innocent and fight to get it back. In any other developed country, this would be called what it is, state-sponsored theft. But in the US, it's business as usual. Police departments literally keep the profits, which makes it less about justice and more about looting with a badge. For outsiders, this sounds like something out of a corrupt dictatorship, and frankly, they're not wrong. America is a democracy, so if you like these bizarre draconian laws, more power to you. You have the right to vote and campaign to change them, just like we do in the UK. That's how democracies work. But before you go screeching into every comment section about how other countries handle freedom of expression, maybe take a moment to look at the state of your own backyard. You've got police stealing property without charges, people fined for feeding the homeless, teens arrested for standing in the wrong place. Maybe focus a little less on the UK's hate speech laws, which most Brits support, by the way, and a little more on why your own government can ruin your life without ever setting foot in a courtroom. Just a thought. And perhaps that's the most ironic part of all, because while they posture as defenders of freedom, they're the ones doing the most shouting whenever someone else exercises it. Europe, with its many countries, for all its flaws, is filled with democratic nations where laws can and do change based on public will. If your idea of liberty involves telling the rest of the world how to live, maybe it's not freedom you're defending. just your own ego. The reality that many American gamers miss, or flat out ignore, is that Europe isn't some utopian liberal playground. It's not one big progressive theme park where every dev drinks oat milk and codes from a safe space. Europe is politically fragmented, ideologically chaotic, and in many regions, far more conservative than even the United States. Take a closer look and you'll see a continent wrestling with its own identity crises. Nationalism, immigration, religion, and cultural pushback are all on the rise. France has seen Marine Le Pen's far-right party surge in popularity, with anti-immigration rhetoric becoming not just normalised but central to national debate. Italy is being run by Giorgia Meloni, a staunch nationalist whose platform includes opposition to globalism, feminism, and what she calls the LGBT lobby. She didn't sneak in through the back door, she won by a landslide. Poland and Hungary are balls deep into authoritarian playbooks, having spent years rewriting their constitutions and attacking judicial independence. And then there's the UK, regularly mocked by American gamers as some kind of woke weakling state. Too soft, too censored, too apologetic to be taken seriously. But in reality, the UK undertook the biggest exercise in nationalist self-isolation in modern Western politics: Brexit. It wasn't a symbolic gesture, it was a decisive populist vote to break away from the European Union, driven by largely anti-immigration rhetoric, economic anxiety, and a belief that British identity was being eroded by globalism. It was a seismic cultural moment, a literal campaign built on slogans like "Take back control." The UK has banned puberty blockers for minors, introduced laws restricting gender recognition, legally defined exactly what a woman is, i.e. someone with XX chromosomes, took back public women's toilets and changing rooms, cracked down on illegal immigration with harsh detention policies, and actively gutted human rights frameworks under the guise of sovereignty. If this is woke, then the word has officially lost all meaning. So, when American gamers sneer that the UK is some leftist dystopia because a game dev from Brighton included a non-binary NPC, they're not just being ignorant, they're displaying a total disconnect from political reality. The country they think is too soft literally made global headlines for telling half a continent to get lost. That's not softness. That's ideological whiplash in a Union Jack wrapper. But the European fun doesn't stop there, as then there are Sweden and the Netherlands, where populists, anti-immigration parties have made serious inroads into power, fueled by cultural anxieties not unlike those brewing in Texas or Ohio. If you stripped the flags away and just read the headlines, rallies against migrants, culture war, talking points in parliament, attempts to roll back trans rights, your average American gamer would probably assume you were talking about Florida or maybe even Arizona. And yet somehow, these same particular gamers turn around and frame Europe as the source of all of this woke decay. Basically, what you're looking at is pure cognitive dissonance. These aren't secret policies tucked away in EU white papers. They're major elections, front-page news, national debates playing out on a scale that often makes the US political discourse look like amateur hour. The truth is, American gamers who buy into the woke Europe narratives aren't reacting to actual politics, they're reacting to aesthetic signifiers. The disconnect is staggering, and yet the narrative persists because it's not about accuracy, it's about having a scapegoat. All these people seem to care about is having a villain that fits their narrative, and Europe as a cartoonish straw man is perfect for that role. These American gamers are not engaging with facts, they're vibing. And those vibes are curated by rage-bait thumbnails, angry reaction videos, and algorithm-fed misinformation. None of it has to make sense, it just has to feel correct to the outrage engine. These gamers aren't interacting with reality, they're arguing with a cardboard cutout of Europe that they built themselves out of Reddit threads, clickbait, and Twitch stream tantrums. At the core of all of this, we need to be honest. This outrage isn't really about Europe at all. It's about American projection. Plain and simple. The fears, the frustrations, the growing sense of cultural loss that many American gamers feel about their own industry are real, but instead of turning that lens inward and asking how we got here, they look outward because it's easier. It's cleaner, and it means that they never have to confront the fact that many of the things ruining gaming are being manufactured at home. These gamers see corporate overreach in the form of $70 deluxe editions with day one DLC, battle passes and surprise mechanics. They see censorship, real or perceived, when games tone down gore, sexualization or drop slurs from online chat. They feel a loss of identity as gaming evolves from what they knew, often rightly so, and they're tired of creative stagnation from massive studios endlessly rebooting franchises instead of taking risks. But instead of pointing the finger at American boardrooms or Wall Street publishers, the ones actually shaping modern gaming, some gamers blame Europe, because Europe has become a catch-all code word for anything they don't like. The UK becomes censorship and weak men. France, a decaying civilization wrapped in pretentious game design. Scandinavia gets turned into some rainbow-flagged nanny states obsessed with diversity quotas. These aren't real places to them, they're memes. They're not reacting to what's happening in Paris or Stockholm, they're reacting to what's happening in San Francisco and LA, but calling that out would mean holding their own side accountable, so instead, the outrage gets redirected. It's not critique, it's deflection. Because once you realise Europe is just a placeholder for whatever makes them uncomfortable, it all clicks into place. What we're seeing is cultural insecurity. A loud, nervous corner of gaming that's terrified things are changing. So they invent enemies. They blame a continent. And the funny part, most of them couldn't even point to the places they're angry at on a map. And all of that is valid criticism. But that doesn't matter because they're not fighting Europe, they're fighting the idea of Europe. And that idea has become the perfect villain in a culture war that was never really about games. Don't forget you can get 43% off Expedition 33 and up to 90% off thousands of games using my links below. But if you would like to support me in a more personal way and gain access to my library of cosplay pictures, then please consider backing me over on Patreon. A bientôt. Ciao.